Keep it going for Bryan Kett, you guys.
Hi. So there's that old saying, to err is human, to forgive divine. And after Melissa and I broke up, I didn't feel divine at all. I felt hurt. I felt angry because we were close. You know, we even grocery shopped together, which to a 21-year-old was pretty serious. But after we, called it quits, we decided that we were going to stay friends and support one another. And I was so happy to do that, but this became so difficult for me when she began to date Pete. Because all I ended up hearing about was how great Pete was, because, Pete did charity work. And Pete was the kind of guy who could, make coffee tables out of old barnwood. And they looked great. And I never met Pete, and he seemed great, but I hated Pete so much. I compared myself to him every chance I had. And anytime, Melissa would go ahead and she would bring him up, and the only thing I could do is I would just accidentally call him Paul. That was the only thing I had in my arsenal. And so Melissa would ask me if I was seeing anyone. I would say, yeah, I'm dating. And that was totally true if dating meant rewatching Twin Peaks again. So I was at a low. Because with every breakup, there are winners and there are losers. And whoever moves on first wins. And I realized that I was losing when Melissa told me that Pete had whisked her off to New York City spontaneously one weekend. And it was then and there that I decided that I was going to go out and I was going to find someone. Because it was going to be good for me. And it was going to be a good way to be better than Pete. And so, at a party a couple weeks later, I met Abby, and we hit it off, and she looked like this just stunning blonde chipmunk, and her dimple game was just on point, and we set a dinner date for the following week, and I picked a really fancy restaurant to expedite our inevitable relationship. And so the night of our date, there was this terrible blizzard. This was in Chicago, and I was there early. And Abby, when she showed up, she walked in and she had a parasol she was holding to keep the snow away, and she looked radiant. And that was the first time I had ever seen a parasol in real life, and that was really neat too. And so I'm in this restaurant with her, and because the weather was so bad, we were the only two customers. And so between that and the roaring fireplace and the snow outside, it was this perfect romantic moment filled with so much beauty. And this was it for me. This was my chance, and I tried to get to know her. And it was really apparent that she kept steering the conversation, back to her previous relationship over and over again. Something was on her mind that she wanted to share with me, but she just couldn't bring herself to. It kept going back to the previous relationship. And I thought it was obvious. She was hung up on an ex-boyfriend. And out of habit, I began to compare myself to this guy. She said, oh my gosh, in my last relationship, there was so much love. And I said, big deal. Love's everywhere. She said her last relationship had been 7 years. And I said, good riddance. It's over. And when she told me that she still talked to him, I softened because I could relate. I could empathize. I told her I still talk to Melissa, but that meant things were still over between us. It was time to move on because there was something better on the horizon. And we had this, we connected. It was wonderful. And before I could start eating my ravioli, she blurted out what had really been on her mind this entire time, and I could not have been more wrong because what she told me was that she was a former nun who had just left her convent. And I said, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I didn't know nuns could date. And she just stared at me. And I said, how long were you at the convent? And she said, 7 years. And I put down my fork. And I asked her who her last relationship had been with. And she said, God. And suddenly it all made sense because she never said boyfriend, she said relationship. And there had been so much love, and then she still talked to him. Talk, you mean pray? Apparently this him had a capital H that we were just, didn't know about. And so after that, discussion kind of faltered. There was really nothing else to talk about. We couldn't go to talk about our favorite movies or anything. And so I paid. And we left, and we went our separate ways. And as I trudged home in the snow, I just reflected, and I thought about how ridiculous it was that I had been comparing myself to Abby's old boyfriends. That's a comparison that I could not win no matter what. But then it hit me that so was my comparison to Pete, because I'd been having this argument in my head with him at all times, and the only person it was hurting was me. And because of this, I wasn't acting like a friend to Melissa. I was acting like an ex-boyfriend. I was being petty when I should have been supportive. And so when I talked to Melissa the following week and she told me that, Pete was apparently a gourmet chef, because, what can't that guy do? I didn't call him Paul. I called him by his actual name, and I told her how happy I was for the two of them. And I was, because there's that old saying, right? To err is human, to forgive divine. And I forgave. I forgave Melissa for moving on. I forgave Pete for being so wonderful. And I forgave myself for, kind of struggling and having a hard time. And I guess if anyone were to help me learn that lesson, feel that way, feel so divine, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it was Abby's old boyfriend. Thanks.